couple of little jobs now. One of them I'm going to do because Don can't very well thank himself, but I'm going to thank a lot of people who've been very involved. I'll start, of course, with thanking Don, who has done a huge amount for this, as you can probably imagine, but also not everyone. Yes, where's he gone? Did he hear that? Oh, you'll have to tell him you clapped him. Also, Leslie, who's sitting there, I don't think anyone knows just how much Leslie does. She manages all our Zooms. If any of you have seen any of our sessions on Zoom, Leslie manages it. She also edits and puts together the newsletter, and she also manages a lot of our tech stuff in addition to, of course, what she's done on the day. And I'd like also to thank Jasper, who's handled the IT and the microphone and everything so very competently. So thank you there too. I hope he heard that. Karen, who possibly none of you have met, who I think at the moment is on the Gold Coast, isn't she, where she owns an apartment. She does a lot of nice swimming and things, but she manages all our affairs distantly. And I think I heard Paul comment on David Evans' candidature being in absentia, as it were. But Karen does a spectacular job by distance, and we need to thank her for that. Other people who've been very helpful, of course, is Lynn, who is ever helpful, coming up with good ideas, does a lot of things and often doesn't take the credit, but a lot of things with Facebook and getting some other ideas together and helping looking after the website. So thank you, Lynn. And today also, although she's gone now, we had Louise Goswell bringing in the books from the Australian University of Theology. The other person who's done a lot of good quietly by stealth is David Starling, who joined the committee recently, who sat there nobly on the donations and reception chair for a very large part of the conference. So I'm sorry everyone didn't hear that they were thanked. Don, you were just thanked. Jasper, you were just thanked. Everybody else heard that they were thanked who's here, I hope. So Don, I've done your thank yous for you because you couldn't thank yourself. And they all clapped you. Oh, no, don't worry. Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you. That's very kind. I've thanked Leslie. Yes, fulsomely, I've thanked Leslie. And of course, I'm sure Don will do this anyway. Thank you all for coming. There would be no conference if there was no one to deliver the papers to. And some of you are new, some of you are loyal, you've come year after year, and all that is much appreciated. And I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be much fun if there were just half a dozen of us sitting here looking at each other. So we do appreciate it. Now, you will have seen the list that Karen compiled in the book of notes. She's done a wonderful job there, she does with everything, but of course it's governed simply by the fact that she can only do what people send her. So the only publications I'll be able to mention are the ones that she was sent, with one notable exception of a very modest person who didn't send his in. But if there's any that aren't here that you felt should have been, I'm very sorry about that, but do tell us next time. I'd also like to confess, and I'm sure you won't be surprised when you look at this list, obviously there's very few of them that I actually read, some because they only came recently, and some because how could I possibly read all of New Docs A and B, although I have started quite substantially through New Docs A I've had for a while. And Michael, I've got to confess you, I'll never read yours, but I will look it up. I'll use it as a reference book. So what I've had to do is to consult that very distinguished and respectable authority, Professor Google, and I found out a little bit to say about each of the publications, I said most of which I actually haven't read. And first of all, going through the list, I see that Karen's helpfully has arranged it alphabetically. First of all, we have Paul Barnett, The Trials of Jesus. Now that one, unlike some of them, is very readily accessible. I think I got mine I didn't get mine, but they are available from Koorong. I'd just like to say that, of course, Paul has been a long-standing member both of the SEC and was the former chair of the New Docs Committee before he stood down from that, and a very long supporter of ours. But the very interesting thing about Paul Barnett is that he's quite an unusual combination. He's both a very well-trained ancient historian, trained by Professor Judge, who can probably testify to that, and in the same honours class, I believe, as Tom Hillard years ago at Sydney University, plus a trained theologian, plus, of course, one who's held many roles in the church. And I think this stands out when you look at his book. You'll see there's a commendation by Con and others in this book. The interesting thing I think about, one of the many interesting things that I think Paul Barnett contributes, is that he's got a very, very good sense of chronology and geography. That is what a lot of historians and New Testament people don't have. They don't take into account how could somebody have been in this place at this time and then somewhere else at another time. He's very good at putting all that together. So I would recommend The Trials of Jesus as a good historical background. I haven't found too much yet to criticise in it. I might ask Professor Judge sometime if he's found them, but I haven't yet. Now, the next one is on our list because Thomas Blandon did come to SEC several years ago. I'm not going to deal with his book because it's not yet published, although it does say next time on it. So it does say not published, but we'll do it next time. It's a Brill book, so it should be very substantial. And I was very interested when Professor Google told me that it deals with the reception of Abraham in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And that sounds like a very good book to take account of. I'm sure it's something that we should all be aware of when we can see it. Might have to look at it in libraries because Brill's always expensive. But it reminds me, a few years ago at our church when I was asked to chair a session on Muslim-Christian dialogue, basically, the final sentence from Genesis, which I offered them, they didn't totally bite on it, was when Abraham says to God, "Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" So Abraham, the common father of those three religions, it would be very interesting, I think, to read this book when we can. Now, Amelia Brownie had a spectacular introduction the other night on Zoom, and I believe from Leslie that's the highest number we've had at a curtain raiser. Is that right? I believe so. She's also been a very keen supporter of the Society for many years. And obviously I haven't read this one, but I looked up what it said and I consulted the German translation on my Duolingo. And it seems to be, it says a panorama of the Roman colony and port city, current state of archaeology. It deals with the intersection between ancient history, urban research, the Bible, religious studies, and what Amelia adds to this is the mind of a very well-trained classicist. So I do recommend it when you get a chance to read it, as I will. Ditto goes for her, not the German side, goes for her the ancient mariners, pilgrims in the late antique Mediterranean. And the interesting thing about pilgrims, of course, again, it requires some knowledge of geography, but also it's balancing the tension between they're in one place, but they're moving to another. So she deals with that, I understand, very well. I'm actually meeting her next Friday. I might ask her how she dealt with it, but I haven't read that one either. The next one alphabetically on our list is, now I'm going to say something here. When I went through with my highlighter, I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edited books by Jim Harrison. Jim, I just want to ask you one thing. When do you sleep? And how do you sleep? You don't. Well, no wonder. They shall neither slumber nor sleep. Well, I'm amazed. And so this is a Jim Harrison jointly edited volume with some very well-known names attached. And particularly, I'll mention Alan Cadwallader, those of you who are in good contact with him. I'm sorry he couldn't come this time. He's in the throes of moving house. But do tell him he got a Guernsey for his efforts, won't you, when you speak to him. Desley Campbell, whose nephew is here, representing the family, has, I think, 2 degrees from Macquarie, a doctorate from Sydney, and keeps me well up to date with her archaeological and other research, which she's very devoted to. And this book of hers on synagogues in the 1st century, some of her books are only published online, but this one is really very interesting. There's a tiny weeny picture of it there. I didn't know how to enlarge it. But she sent me an advanced copy of it, and it is extremely interesting and, as you'd expect from Desley, very well informed and very well balanced. So would you like to pass that on to her, that we gave her a Guernsey also? Now, next we have more Jim Harrison. We've got Rosemary Canavan, who's here, Jim Harrison and another man, on public inscriptions and their iconography. And here's a beautiful picture of a launch that I wasn't able to go to. Isn't that nice? And now you'll see what Bradley Bittner, who was the joint editor of the New Docs series, looks like. Lynn, I only wish I'd been there. It must have been a wonderful occasion. And at that point was launched the public inscriptions and their iconography. And Rosemary, seeing your exquisite illustrations last time. I'm not surprised that you're an expert on iconography, but that looks a really good one. Now, next on the list is one that, of course, very dear to my heart, the Supplementum Epigraphicum Graecum. How many volumes, Michael? I've got it somewhere. Actually, I've got it written somewhere. 69, I was going to say 67 off the top of my head, 69 volumes. Obviously, I have not read them all. However, I have frequently consulted it, and it's a terrific honour to have Michael with us, because the editors of this are the very top in linguistic analysis in the world, and we're very privileged to have Michael here. And what a feather in your cap to be involved in. Well, they're lucky to have you, aren't they? Let me put it another way. But obviously I won't read it, but I'm sure many of us, and no doubt Jim and others, will want to consult it. And it's really a pleasure. Are you working on volume 70? Oh, good. Next time. Next time. Now, I won't say any more about new docs, because you've heard magnificently from Con and Jim, but I will remind you that this discount code, which you can collect from the desk, applies until the 15th of May. Hang on. This is the 17th, isn't it? I'm sure they'll give them a discount, won't they? Oh, that's all right then. Lasts till July. So you've got these sheets you can do it with. If you have any problems, I suggest you contact Jim directly. Does that sound all right? But they're certainly worth having for reference, and maybe not quite for bedtime reading, but certainly for good reference. So they've been very adequately and thoroughly dealt with. Edwina Murphy has been a long-standing supporter of our society, come to many of our seminars, also a Macquarie graduate, her doctorate on Cyprian, and in a senior role in the Australian University of Theology. I believe she's not around at the moment, is that correct? Oh, Saturday. Well, please tell her that not only did I look up, of course, her not only did I look up her volume, the 3rd century onwards, but I refreshed my memory about the one she had on the 2nd century. So really, you need to consult them both. She's done, with the same team, she's looked at the whole concept of deacons and diaconia, really from, Middle Empire through to the late Empire. Now, Jim's book on, which is that one, Jim? That's the Cadwallader book, which Jim just showed me. Well, I haven't had a chance to read that yet, Jim, but I'm very glad that you brought it along so people can see it, and I hope people who want it again will contact Jim. There's also, where are we? There's another one here. There we are, the Everyday Life in Greco-Roman Times, which is here. This is a really fascinating one. And what's, I think, particularly important about this one is that it tries to make accessible to senior graduates and so on, and people who might not be so familiar with the way documentary papyri illuminate the New Testament. You must all realise now that documentary papyri and inscriptions do illuminate the New Testament, but this book will really sharpen your focus, and if you're engaged in any way, either through interest or professionally, I really would suggest that you have a look at it now, photograph it if you like, and consult Jim. But the publication details are there. Here's the village one. We've got one more Jim one to show you. The Inscriptions, Papyri and Other Artefacts, which is another one. I've got some very well-known names in this one too. You see that Jim's work is having worldwide circulation, and as well as getting his own magnificent set of collaborators, and that takes some doing, getting other people to join you and to deliver on time. Takes a lot of doing. He's also been a very valued contributor to a number of other series. They're literally weighty. Now, going alphabetically, I'm going to mention one which wasn't put on the list because the man's very modest. This is Paul McKechnie's A Monument More Lasting Than Bronze, which you may have heard of. This is a really fascinating book in which he gathers contributions from people connected with classics in the University of Malawi. That might surprise you to know that classics was and is to some extent still taught in the University of Malawi, where Paul has spent some time, both voluntarily and in a paid capacity. If you're interested in hearing more about it, he's kindly consented to give a talk at our SEC end-of-year function where he'll be talking about what some of the things that are mentioned in this book. Not only the classic side, I must say, really interests me, and the Classical Association had a launch of this book at our house in February. However, he also has some very interesting comments on the role that missionaries as well as classicists played in the life of Malawi, and some interesting observations too on how life's going in Malawi for people nowadays. A short summary might be better than in most countries in Southern Africa, but still leaves a bit to be desired. Is that right, Paul? Vaguely what he said. And finally, we have another Macquarie graduate, James Unwin, who also can't be here. I think he's in New Zealand, is that right? But he's written a book on Paul and Seneca among the condemned, and this has gained particular attention because he has remarks to make about people, not only about the ancient situation, but what it's like for people living in tyrannical or unjust societies now and the fate that they can suffer. So it's got some sort of modern relevance. We always like to say we're relevant, don't we? So James has done that in addition to his study, which is very detailed and which he did take a while to finish, but it was very worthwhile in the end when he finished it. So we're proud of the fact that everybody on this list is connected in some way with Macquarie, often as a graduate or as a staff member or in some way. And it's a magnificent set of books. I'm just hoping that next year I'll have even more that I can speak about if I'm asked to speak on them again by Don. So thank you, everybody. Any questions needed on that? I've got the Google comments here if you want to read Google comments on any of these, but I'm sure you can do it yourselves.
Yeah, except we need to say something about the present situation in Macquarie.
Yes. Well, we are going through a difficult period at Macquarie where quite a number of our courses are being cut back. I don't want to say too much because it is still under consideration. I'm not totally optimistic about the result of the consideration, but if any of you would like to perhaps offer some contribution or something, you could perhaps talk to either Don or myself afterwards. At the moment, the languages are being either eliminated or severely cut back. We're not sure what the result of that will be, and I probably ought not, as I'm not even on the staff, say any more. Those on the staff do know more, but it's at the moment not looking very bright. There have been a number of people from around the world writing. I think the time for that may have passed in that we got some very high-profile replies in from people who had heard the news. So I think the best thing we could do would be to keep you updated. But if you'd like to know ways in which you can help, and certainly if the languages are under severe threat, we may need more help to cope with that. Consult Don, myself, possibly Paul, and any others.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.